So at this point in our project, we have a pretty solid prototype. However, there is one thing that's pretty glaringly obviously missing from this stage of development, and that is audio. You'll notice that as I run through this, nothing is making any sort of sound. And audio is a really important system for player feedback. You actually get a lot of information about the level in the world via the audio. So we're going to look at how to add some placeholder prototype audio sound effects to our game. Now, obviously, the best way to source audio is to record your own. It just makes things a lot simpler when it comes to licensing and things like that. However, that is not always possible, although I do encourage you to go out and start recording different sound effects. You'd be surprised what kind of things, make certain noises. I believe I read an article once that talked about the jetpack sound in No Man's Sky is actually a Dyson air dryer that they recorded in a public bathroom. But regardless, if you are not able to source your own audio recordings, there are a couple options for you. There are, several audio sourcing websites that require a pretty nominal subscription. However, the one that I use the most for my own prototypes is Freesound. So this is the Freesound website. It is just sort of a user-generated content website in which you can upload and download sounds for free, and some are paid, some are free. It really depends on the sound. You will need to make an account, and I do caution you that if you are trying to make a game that you plan to monetize in any way, you need to be very cautious about where you're sourcing your audio from with regards to legal rights and royalties and things like that. But Freesound is a great source for simple sound effects. You can search something like thud, right? You'll get all these sorts of different sound effects that you can preview and you can download. I do, however, suggest that you pay very close attention to the licensing here. Again, if this is just a personal learning project for you, it's less of a concern, but if you do plan on, publishing this in any way, any project that you're working on, you want to make sure you're using a open source license like Creative Commons, and that you pay attention to any attributions that you need to do to give to the original creator to avoid any sort of legal trouble. So, this is a great source for finding free audio effects, and you can download them to your hard drive. Of course, always be careful about what you download off the internet. So once you have your audio source recordings on your hard drive, I want to show you how to bring them into Unreal. Now, Unreal, I believe at this point in time, can only accept a .wav file, so make sure that all your audio recordings are in that format. If you need to convert it, there are lots of programs that you can use to convert different file types for audio, such as Audacity. I think even VLC Player allows you to do simple conversions such as that. So once you have all those downloaded somewhere on your hard drive, we can bring them into Unreal. So I'm going to create a new folder for my audio here. And within my audio here, so I have a folder on my hard drive that has all of the .wav files that I'm going to use for this project. So I'm just going to select all of these, and I'm just going to drag them straight into the content folder from my file browser to pull them into Unreal. And of course, because these are .wav, they import no problem. So these are some of the sounds I'm going to be using. Anyway, you get the idea. These are not intended to be like final sounds. If you were working on a larger project with a team, you'd probably have an audio designer. But think of these as placeholders the same way these mesh pieces are. So let's look at how to implement these. Now that we have them imported, let's look at how to implement these into our actual blueprints themselves. So the first one I will want to look at are these falling blocks. So right now, if we play this and we run through, these blocks fall, but they are completely silent. So let's add a sound effect here for when these hit the ground. So I'm going to go into my blueprints folder right here, and I'm going to open the falling block blueprint. Just going to close these out from the last thing we worked on. So here is the code that we wrote for our falling block. Forgot to comment something. So we just want to think about when we want this sound to happen. You have to remember that all of this stuff is executing very quickly. So you really need to be careful about where you place these audio effects. So we begin our overlap, our block falls, and then after a short delay, it rises. So we want the audio effect to occur once it has hit the ground, but before it rises up. So that means it would be placed right here in the flow of our code. So to play a simple audio sound such as this one, it's very straightforward. I'm just going to drag off the finished node from the block fall timeline, and I'm just going to type in play sound at location. There's also a play sound 2D, which will just play a sound out of your speakers without regards to where the object is in the world. However, in this case, because there is a physical 3D object that is, quote unquote, causing the sound, I want it to be at that specific location. So we have to tell it, first of all, what sound to play here. And if we click this drop down, we get all the sounds that were available to us from our import. So the one I want to use for this is the cartoon thud sound, which, if you recall, is this sort of large crashing sound, which I think will work for the block. Next, we have to give it a location. I want it to just play where the actor itself is, where this blueprint is. So we're just going to type in get actor location on the event graph, and then I'm going to connect this yellow dot to that yellow dot. So let's test this out to see how this sounds. So I'm just going to right click and press play from here. All right, that's pretty good. Because I wrote this within the blueprint itself, obviously each instance of this blueprint now has this sound associated with it. So every time one of these falls, it will play that sound. Pretty cool. All right, we're going to move along at pretty fast pace here because most of these are pretty straightforward, and it's going to follow the exact same formula we just used for this falling block. So let's move forward to our next thing that I want to cause sound, and that is these fire spurts. So I've already imported the fire blaze audio, which is right here. And I unfortunately don't own the rights to these because I license them off of Freesound, so I cannot provide these audio clips to you in supplementary materials. You will have to source your own audio, but you can do so through Freesound. Just make sure you check the licenses. So let's open our fire blueprint here. And this one's a little bit more complex. There's a little bit more code going on. But if we really think about it, what we want to happen is we want it to start playing the sound when our fire is activated, when our visibility is true, and we want it to stop when it's deactivated. So this one is slightly more complex than the falling block, but it is still overall a pretty simple system. So to create our sound over here, we need to use a different node here. So I'm first going to get our actor location because we still want to play our sound at the location of our blueprint actor. So we still need this node here, but instead of using the play sound at location node, we're going to use one that's called spawn sound at location. And the reason I'm using this and not play is because I need this audio to play continuously until I leave the trigger volume, and then I want it to stop. And the play sound at location will just play your sound effect through, and it doesn't have any more complex controls for starting and stopping sound at specific times. So you could use the spawn sound at location here as well, but we just don't need that advanced functionality for the falling block, but we will need it for the fire spurt. So it looks fairly similar. It just says spawn sound at location instead of play, and the sound we want to spawn, of course, is the fire blaze. So let's compile and test this out. Of course, I have moved my my player start back. So let's play from here. And it's also killed my player because I forgot to set my default health back to 100 and I got hit. Okay, so let me set my default health back to 100 in my player character so that doesn't happen again. And actually I'm going to move my player start because I'm going to keep forgetting and I'm going to keep pressing that and having to run through the whole thing. And I just don't want to do that. Okay, let's move the player start back to where we need it to go. Okay, so right now you can run through it, but you can see all those instances of the fire blaze sound are spawning on top of each other, and we're not telling them to shut off at any point. So that is sort of an issue. So we need to tell it to stop when we leave the trigger volume here. So right here under the deactivate code where we end our visibility, we also want to end the sound here. So the way we're going to do that is with this object reference here is returning the reference to this sound effect itself. So from here we can drag this off and press and just type in stop, and under audio you'll get stop. It is also, we don't want it to execute off of this, however, we don't want it to execute off of this. We're just using this one to get a reference to it. So let's try this now. Okay, and it stops just the way we expect it to. So that's pretty good. However, there is one more issue with this, is that if I trigger this, see if I can do it without getting hit. Anyway, if I trigger this, and for whatever reason a glitch occurs where I can stay within, there we go. So this is what I'm talking about. The fire is still going, but the audio has stopped, and that is because I didn't ever leave the trigger volume, but the sound effect, itself, the audio recording is only a few seconds long. So I need to set this audio to loop continuously until we tell it to stop. And the way that we're going to do that is in the audio component itself. So I'm going to double click to open this up, and we get an editor just like we get for every other asset in Unreal. And it gives us a lot of options here for things like volume and pitch, so you can sort of equalize the volume of your sound effects. If you import one and it is way louder than the other because of the nature of the file, you can manually change that all in here. But the one I want to look at is this looping checkbox right here. We just need to set this one to true. So that means that when we are standing in the fire, this audio will loop continuously until we tell it to stop. So that will prevent things like the audio stopping after we die in the fire. Now, obviously, this audio clip itself has a fade in and a fade out to it, so you do get a little bit of hitching, but do keep in mind that these are just placeholders. So, ideally, you would come back at a later date when you are finishing off this game with all your art assets, and you would create a better sound file for it that was fit more appropriately for your use case. Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording right here and take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to finish up adding audio to all of our blueprints. Okay, so we are back, and we're just going to do a quick video to finish up adding sound effects in to our blueprint items here. So we have done sound effects for the falling blocks, for the fire spurts. So let's just keep moving forward through the level. So here we have our health pickup item. I'm just going to open the blueprint here, and I want this to have like a pop noise when we pick it up, so that the player knows that they have done something correct. So we have our actual pickup functionality right here. We begin our overlap, we check if it's the player. If it is, we get our current health, we add the heal amount, and we reset the health. So after we set our health, but before we destroy the actor from the world, we want to play a sound. This is going to be a simple sound, so we can use the simpler play sound at location node. The sound we're going to play is the cartoon pop sound. And of course, we're just going to get the location of our actor in the world for the sound of the location. Now just keep in mind that this play sound, it has to become before the destroy actor. I discussed this a little bit previously when we talked about adding this destroy actor node, but we cannot have anything coming off of this end of the destroy actor because it won't be able to read anything if the actor doesn't exist in the level anymore. So yeah, just keep in mind that always this code progresses linearly from right to left, so anything over here will be read after this node, and because this node is destroying itself, basically, we can't do anything after we self-destruct. So keep in mind that this all has to come beforehand. So let's test that out in the level. There we go, a nice little pop when we pick it up. And yeah, this is all pretty straightforward, so let's just keep moving forward with the button and the gate system here. The button right here, I want to have a sound effect, and I want to have a separate sound effect for the gate rising up. So the sound I want to use for the button is this big thud. It's just sort of more of a clicking sound to indicate to the player that if they can't see the actual button going down, maybe their camera is up here or something, I just want them to have some audio feedback as well. So let's open the button blueprint, and we're done with the health pickup, so we can X that out. And let's think about where we want this to occur. So let's actually, I forgot to comment this. So this section of code is what controls the gate opening and closing. But before this happens, but after the button is pressed, we want to play the sound. So it's going to go in right here where this reroute node is. So for this one, I believe we can also just use the play sound. Oops, not that one. Play sound at location. We're going to select Big Thud, and we're going to get the actor location for this blueprint. Here we go. Okay, let's test this out. So it's currently playing whether or not we are stepping onto or off of the button. That's largely up to you. If you only want it to play that sound when you step on the button, you could place it after the this branch right here. Just place it in the true. I kind of like it at both locations, or both instances, I should say. So I'm going to leave it where it is. So the next thing I want to do is I want to have a sound that, I want the gate itself to make a sound when it's opening. So perhaps if the player is like looking at the button and not the gate sound would, you know, spur them to look up and see that the gate is now open. So let's add that in by opening up our gate blueprint here. And this one is going to use the spawn sound at location node in the same way that the fire did, because we want the sound to be playing while the gate is moving, but after the gate is open and stops moving, we do not want it to continue to play the sound effect. Because if you recall, the sound effect that we're using is this scraping stone. This is our last sound effect that we imported and have not used yet. And if we play it, it's a few seconds long. So our gate does not take quite that long to open. So what we're going to do is, instead of pulling off this finished, I'm going to actually put this sound effect beforehand, because if I pull it off of the finished the way we have with everything else, it would open and then play the sound effect, which is not what we want. We want the sound effect to be playing during the animation. So you may be wondering, well, why can't I just pull it off of this update then? And that is because this update will continue to fire continuously over the entire course of the animation. So basically you'll get, you know, many instances of the same sound overlapping each other, and it just sounds awful. It doesn't sound like much of anything. So we're actually going to put the audio first. We're going to trigger the audio, hit play on the audio, and then hit play on the animation, and it should work out just fine. So this one is probably a little bit more complex than our fire one even was, but let's just go ahead and move forward with it. So I'm just going to make some room right here to put in some nodes, and off of this gate open event, we're going to spawn a sound. That location, it's going to be the scraping stone. And of course, we just want to get our actor location for the location. Okay, so this is all well and good. It will start playing this when the animation starts, roughly. So I'm just gonna drag in my player reference into this room because I keep forgetting that I haven't moved it. So if we hit play, but like I said, it's playing for much too long. We want it to stop when the animation stops. So let's look at that. So when the animation is finished, we need this to stop. So off of this return value here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say stop the audio. I'm gonna double click to add a reroute node just to make it a little bit more clear what is going on. Now, there is sort of an issue with this. You're gonna get errors because we are using the same timeline forward and backward to open and close the gate. We are only spawning the sound when the gate is opened, and we are not spawning it when it's closed. So if we're running through from here, reversing it, and then going through finished, and it tries to stop it, it's not going to understand what we are trying to stop because we never hit this node. So there's just some error handling that we need to do in order to make this work properly. And that is to add an is valid node before we stop it. And then we're going to give it this input from this return value. And basically, if it's valid, we can then stop it. Basically, does this reference even exist in our world? If it does, stop it. If it doesn't, do nothing. So that is how we are going to handle some of these errors here. Let's test it out and see where we're at right now. Let's hit play. Great. And if we wait 10 seconds, it will close again. However, I don't want to wait 10 seconds, so I'm going to change my delay time on the button down to 1 for testing purposes. So let's go and step off. And this is all working correctly. However, we're not playing the noise now when we close the gate. Because if you recall, we're starting the sound here on the gate open, but not on the gate closed. So we basically just need to do the same thing here down here. So let's highlight these. Actually, let's just highlight this one and press Control and D to duplicate it. And then I'm going to run these execution pins through here like this. So it already has the scraping stone sound effect already put into the node because I duplicated it. So we're just going to drag that reference in there to give it that same location. Now, just as we handled some potential errors over here, we need to handle them the same way over here, because although these sound effects are the same, because we're spawning them individually, Unreal basically doesn't understand that these are the same things. So I could not just put this one in here. I basically need to do another is valid check off of this one. I'm just going to move this up to make the connections a little bit more understandable and a little bit more readable. So off of this one, we're going to say, okay, does this exist? And if it does, we're going to stop it. But if this does not exist, we need to check if this one does. Because if we didn't run through this way, then we must have run through this way. So we need to check if this one exists separately. So again, just double clicking, just add some reroute nodes for clarity. So if this one is not true, then we're going to check if this one is true afterwards, which is what is happening right here. And if this one is true, then we can stop the sound that is coming from this node here. Again, I'm just going to add some reroute so you can see the connections a little bit more clearly. Maybe like that. Okay. So this is a little bit more complicated than it probably should be, but this is how we have to handle it based on the way we have set up our gate system. So let's compile and save, and let's test this out. So we do have some bugs still, but we'll squash those at a later date. For the most part, it has to do with the collision running back and forth onto this thing. Yeah, as long as you don't run back and forth too much, it should work. So we'll look at those at a later date when we talk about bug squashing, but for the time being, we are all set here. So that is all I want to talk about for our audio here. And this is actually going to conclude the prototyping portion of this project. So in the next section, we are going to actually be switching gears a little bit, and we're going to be using Blender to create some art assets for this project. Now, we're not going to be creating every single asset for this project live on camera because that would be insane and time consuming, but I am going to walk you through how to make different types of assets, such as props, how to make certain tiling pieces like this, and then we're going to look at how to make a custom character, and then we're going to look at replacing this guy with something more appropriate for our level. So that is what is coming up in the next section, and I will see you guys in the next video.